Welcome to the Aquaculture Systems and Soy Inclusion Rates webinar presented by the Soy Aquaculture Alliance. The Alliance works to create new opportunities for U.S. soybean farmers within a growing domestic aquaculture market. The Alliance funds programs and research that increases the utilization of U.S. soybeans in the diets of fish and shrimp through affiliations with academic and private researchers and industry leaders. The Soy Aquaculture Alliance board is made up of U.S. soybean farmers and industry members. The U.S. produces the most consistent, dependable, and sustainable soybeans in the world. So feeding domestic soy to domestic fish just makes sense. How we get there, including soy in the diet, first and foremost, then maximizing inclusion rates, contriving better diets, looking at all the species applicable. It's all based on research, and that research starts with good questions and good conversation. So that's the goal today. My name is Courtney Knupp. I'm with the U.S. Soybean Export Council, and I'm our director of aquaculture and animal nutrition meal. So when we export soy, all of that meal that ends up in aquaculture diets in each of our key regions, I help set the strategy for that. And we work closely with the Soy Aquaculture Alliance. Again, aquaculture is a key opportunity for U.S. soybean farmers and utilization of the great product that we produce. With this, we have three speakers today and panelists, and they will each be presenting 10 minutes on their perspective about domestic aquaculture production systems, feed formulation, and of course, how we look to maximize and fully utilize the benefits of soy in aquaculture diets. After they present, we will have a live Q&A session. So please put your questions in the chat throughout their presentations. And we look forward to that discussion and identifying key gaps and opportunities to explore for the Soy Aquaculture Alliance to further the mission and create more value for U.S. soy and the domestic aquaculture industry. Our first panelist up is Luke Fredrickson. He joins us from Prairie Aquatech, a very exciting company in the feed sector, both supplying domestic and export product in the aquaculture space. So with that, Luke, I'll turn it over to you. Are you able to share your screen? There you go.
Okay.
It's good. We actually need you to split the display settings because we're seeing your current and next slide. So if you go to the top left, display settings. Yep. Click that. And which one? We want to swap presenter view. Yep, hit that.
Okay. Well, good morning. And thanks for inviting me to speak this today. As you said, I work for Prairie Aquatech. A little bit of background on me. I graduated in 2008 with a fisheries degree from the University of Minnesota. I worked in the private fish industry for 7 years, and for the last 7 years, I've been working for Prairie Aquatech. So a lot of what we have been doing here is evaluating alternative feed ingredients. As you maybe mentioned, we have our own fermented soy protein that has over the last 2 years has been commercially available. So
Luke, if you could click your mouse on that swap presenting view and slideshow, I think it'll switch up our view.
Swap.
Yep. Let's try that.
That's the one.
No, try it again. Hit display settings. I think I told you the wrong direction, and duplicate slideshow. Let's try that. I would say go back to the other way you were doing it, and that we will just be fine with it.
Okay, sorry. Now I'm lost to where I was here. Oh, should.
While Luke is speaking, I had the opportunity to be in South Dakota and visit their facilities about a month and a half ago, and it was really fascinating. And I will tell you, from USEC's perspective, they're creating a lot of buzz and excitement for their product, which is unique and pretty high value. So you are looking great now, Luke. Thank you.
Okay, so globally, I would say about 24% of the protein used in aquafeeds is used from terrestrial sources, and we're here to talk about soybean meal, right? So in omnivorous species, they tend to tolerate higher inclusion rates as opposed to carnivorous species that typically have less than 20% inclusion. So what the industry is looking for is alternative sources of protein to help relieve the stress on fish meal and be more sustainable overall. So as I was saying, the omnivorous species, some of the research that we've done in bluegill and tilapia and channel catfish, just regular hexane extracted soybean meal, you can push inclusions of that ingredient, 40, 50% and still maintain very good growth. But kind of the caveat to that is in salmonid species, particularly rainbow trout and Atlantic salmon, you have problems with higher inclusions of soybean meal, which is, it's kind of classified as inflammation or soy-induced enteritis. And with, there's 900 million pounds of salmon being consumed in the US every year. And with, I think, the proposed 180,000 metric tons of land-based aquaculture in trout and salmon production being proposed, we really need to figure out this soy-induced enteritis and try to push inclusion rates of soybean meal so these fish, can be fed more plant-based diets as opposed to fish meal. So a little bit, this is from a Knudsen paper. They had really nice pictures when you're talking about enteritis. So that top slide, the microvilli or the lamina propria is very small, and the supernuclear layer, the filaments are very long. So that allows for normal morphology and the nutrients to be absorbed more readily and maintain good growth. But that bottom picture, you can see that there's a loss of the supernuclear vacuoles, a widening of the lamina propria, and that just decreases the fish's ability to absorb more nutrients. Typically, it causes issues in fecal stability, and especially in a RAS system, you want to maintain, you want a pellet going into the water and you want a pellet coming out of the fish. So we need to kind of examine that more, and there's been a lot of research. So soybean meal and its co-products, the soybean meal is typically less than a 50% in terms of crude protein. But the two I kind of want to focus on is the soy protein concentrates, and our product, for example, is a fermented soy protein. So you're looking at ingredients that are anywhere from 65 to 75% crude protein. And they're obviously higher value, but in terms of the trout and salmon market, I think they fit very nicely and are going to help promote the industry both domestically and worldwide. So some targets for SPCs. and what they bring to the table is you're able to increase those inclusion rates over that conventional soybean meal. So we can go over that 20% inclusion. We see a significant improvement in digestibility, whether it's just protein and fat and even some other nutrients like phosphorus. SPCs typically eliminate all, if not most, of the anti-nutritional factors. They have a much higher protein content. They produce pretty competitive growth rates and conversion rates as opposed to fish meal or controlled diets that we've tested. Probably the only drawback when you're looking at SPCs is you may still need to supplement the diet with some lysine methionine, but that's really compared to just regular conventional soybean meal. There's very little negatives in terms of problems with SPCs. So this is a picture of our systems. We currently have 11 systems. We have a biosecure lab and our own hatchery. So we actually are able to hatch fish and formulate diets for first feeding, and then grow those fish all the way up to market size and kind of track growth rates and kind of, we have our own extruder. So we're able to formulate diets, change diets, and run a lot of trials, whether it's short-term or long-term, on all sorts of different kinds of fish. So some of the, like I was kind of mentioning, first feedings. So we can make crumble lines, micro pellets, and feed these fish diets and push inclusion rates. We can test other novel ingredients as opposed to ours. We do a lot of digestibility work and even looking at the feces themselves and growth rates, whether it's 12-week trials all the way to 48-week trials. We're looking at these fish throughout different life stages, different species, and kind of testing different combinations of ingredients to look at complementary and functionality of different ingredients. And then at the end of each trial, we're doing histology. So we're looking whether or not there is enteritis, the severity of the enteritis, and it all kind of comes together once you look at something on a cellular level or under a microscope. These are two species, like I said, that we're really focused on. So these numbers are the parent digestibility coefficients for just protein. So in trout and Atlantic salmon, there are some differences in terms of protein digestibility, but for the most part, you can see that our fermented soy protein and SPCs typically have a leg up in terms of digestibility over fish meal and even regular soybean meal. And that, in the grand scheme of things, is you want that FCR to be 1, or even in some cases with juvenile fish, you can see FCRs below 1. So when you look at the bioavailable protein in terms of a per ton aspect, because soybean meal is so much lower in protein, right? We're typically in that 46% range. If you look at that, the percent protein of each ingredient multiplied by those ADCs, that 93, 94% ADCs, and multiply that number by each 2,000 pounds for each ton. SPCs and our product, for example, come in at or higher than fish meal. So that's that's really what formulators and nutritionists are looking at. Like, where can I swap out protein? And if you want to swap out fish meal, you need something that has high protein and high digestibility. And with that, I just thought I'd touch a little bit, because a lot of my research and what we're doing is in RAS systems, because there is such a buzz and people are building facilities and trying to raise fish on land. Pond and raceway, there's becoming more and more regulatory challenges. So EPA, these different agencies are looking at these farms' effluent and testing phosphorus, or looking at the nutrients that are coming out of that. So fish meal, for example, is not nearly as digestible in terms of phosphorus. So when you're feeding high fish meal diets, your effluent's going to contain quite a bit of phosphorus that's bound up in scales and bones and whatever else. So I just thought I'd touch on that. I did a lot of work with pond culture in my previous years, but a lot, like I said, a lot of where we need to go as an industry is becoming more sustainable and trying to produce formulations and ingredients to help grow this industry. So with that, I think that's about it. So that's a picture of my pride and joy. I thought I'd share on there. That's a fish that I hatched and grew here. I think she was just under 25 pounds, rainbow trout. So
That is impressive.
I hope I didn't go over, but
That was great.
appreciate you guys' time.
Thank you so much. And we're starting to get some questions in the chat. We will revisit that at the end of all three presentations, but I think we'll have a couple good ones for you, Luke.
Okay.
The second presenter is Mr. Jesse Chappell, and Jesse is no stranger to the U.S. soy family. He's worked with especially USEC and myself in a number of projects, and especially the in-pond raceway system, which was really hatched at Auburn University with his leadership. So Jesse, welcome to the webinar. Jesse also is an aquaculture research and extension specialist and retired from Auburn, as I mentioned. So Jesse, take it away. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Courtney. Thank you, Luke. That was an interesting presentation. I'm assuming you guys can hear me, and I'm going to see if I can switch over to the presentation here, screen sharing, if I can get it to do. All right, let's see here. Can you see that?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, hold on here. Let's see here.
Oh, Philip Lobo says that he can see it. I'm still seeing Kimberly's screen.
Okay. Oh. Sure.
Gotta love this virtual world.
I do not.
There you go. Jesse Chappell has started screen sharing. We are seeing your slides in a number. So if you go to, you got it. Good job, Jesse. Good to go.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody. And I was just teasing everybody when we were coming together here earlier. It takes us Southern boys about 30 minutes just to say hello. And I was telling a joke on Ken about his now white hair. We've known each other for a long time when we both had hair, and it was much, much darker. But anyway, with that, I have to be real quick here because I only got about 30 or 40 minutes, I think they told me. So let's go ahead with it. So what's the most important criteria for success in animal feeding, particularly with fish? I mean, we'd say, well, fast growth or low FCR, carcass yield, protein and fat, all the marketability, all of those. Nope, not it. it is animal survival. And we have to have high levels of survival in aquaculture, just like you do in swine and broilers and that, turkeys, all that sort of stuff. Well, it seems obvious, but we really need to keep restating this, because even though we might have great opportunities for growth, you know, once we get out into the real world, which is, I mean, that's where I'm generally functioning. I wasn't smart enough to do the biochemistry and stuff, so they made me go out and work in the heat and lightning and stuff. So I guess that's what you get when you don't study hard enough. So when we think about our industries here in the United States, I mean, catfish are the big one, but our survival is only about 55% in grow out systems, and I'm being generous with that number. So in those big ponds, when the fish dies, you can't really get a good accounting of it. So your inventory control is really a swag. I mean, you just kind of don't know. And then a lot of guys still are using mixed batches in the same pond, and you get a lot of fish on fish predation. I had a guy I spoke with a couple of days ago, and he had about 1,000 cormorants on his farm, and he said he had to do something different. So these things are problematic. Well, all that said, can we fix it? Can we be competitive in a global seafood industry? Well, maybe, but we've got to do it a little bit differently, probably. Modern production systems, if they're operated correctly, can provide these solutions. And one of them is the in-pond raceway systems, or what we call IPRS. They're being adopted globally, not so much in the United States right now, but globally, they're being adopted pretty rapidly. But any of these confinement culture and controlled environment systems are really going to be more and more critical for aquaculture competitiveness, certainly if they're being produced in this country. And these systems, they seek to provide that optimal environment for survival and growth, not just survival. So when you look at in-pond raceway systems, this thing is a little bit of animation, but it gives you the idea. We run the water around and around in the pond, and it makes a huge difference as to what the planktonic speciation mix is and all those kind of things. And we are really seeking that optimal environment in the raceways you see there at the bottom part of the screen. Now, these are a few advantages to the in-pond raceway system. Well, number one is survival and yield. Because of that, we get very good FCR, and because animals are more in their physiological sweet spot, we get really, really good FCRs and feeding efficiency. We hardly have to use any drugs or chemicals in this system because, generally speaking, we don't have problems. I don't mean to say we don't have any, but problems are minimal. So our cost of production per unit of fish is reduced. And in this system, we can catch 100% of the fish every time we, when we empty out we call them a cell, there's no fish left. You don't have to go hunting them. They're right there. If you got a good dip net, you can dip them all up. And you can do a lot more species than just a monoculture, depending upon where you are and the time of year, what you can market. So all of these things are big deals in today's world. You can increase your cash flow through staggered production and harvesting. A lot easier and less costly for fish held. In this system, you don't have to do any water discharge at all. But one of the aspects about it, especially as it relates to this session this morning, is you can increase your yield by 200 to 300% in the same water volume. Okay, that means you're feeding more feed, but you're also getting higher level or better FCR or lower FCR. Now, a complete and balanced diet is really, really critical to whether you're growing fish in ponds or in RAS. They're completely dependent upon what you give them. And by that, I'm talking about not just for growth, but for survivorship. And that survival is what makes it all work. If you could get the mortalities to occur when the fish were small, that'd be great, but they don't do that. They wait until they get really big and robust, and then they die, and it costs you a lot more money per unit lost. So this system really is about animal survival and feed efficiency, leading to an improved ROI. Looking at the dietary parameters, and again, I'm not a biochemist, not a nutritionist. I'm a fish head. Protein, very important. We're looking at trying to optimize protein, but at the same time, we've got to put in the vitamins and minerals and fats and carbs so that these animals have the most robust immune system and ability to resist challenges within their production environment. Some of them are not bacterial. Some of them are just fish-to-fish interaction that creates a level of stress that they typically don't occur as fish are growing and operating, doing what they do in the wild. So as Luke was saying, I won't belabor this, but when we're looking at full fat soy or soybean meal or SPC, there are different levels that we can utilize, whether the animals are omnivores or carnivores. And I won't, since Luke's already talked about that, I won't bother that much anymore. But the inclusion rates are going to be dependent upon what animal you have, what your production environment is about, but also how much you're going to be able to produce in a given body of water or system if you're doing an enclosed RAS system. So how much should you or do we feed to IPRS or in-pond raceways systems? Well, it depends on the fish size, the temperature, the digestibility of the feed, what your desired FCR is, what kind of growth rate you want, optimal or maximum. We typically recommend people use an optimal rather than maximum growth rate. This is a little graphic that Lovell did years ago, and you can see where that inflection point is in the curve there. That's where you want to be. You don't want to be trying to get maximum growth because you end up with a reduced FCR. If you're at optimal growth, you get your best FCR. And really, that's what this is all about. It's adding value to feed grain. If we have too much slippage, by that I mean poor FCR, you're not going to make much money. So we use a 90% satiation approach in feeding. Very simple and reliable way to do it. Basically, fish are fed 90% of what they will eat in a given feed cycle to optimize growth and FCR. I won't go into how you do the 90% satiation, but it's a very simple technique that farmers use all over the place. Now, here, just a good example of a tilapia grow out trial. There was one done that USEC sponsored several years ago. We stocked 1,200 fish. It's actually 300 fish per cubic meter. I miswrote that. It was a June to November target, starting with 50 gram, going to 500 gram animals, and they were fed a different protein regime, 36, 32, 28, 24, varying the protein level, but the same DE and DP ratios. I think we might be in the way of some of this, but the tilapia diets, like I said, 30, 36, 32, 28, 24, this shows you the overall lineup. About 110 feeding days for the 36 and 32. Again, we're talking about days to reach 500 grams, all right? FCR, you can see along the bottom, survivorship there range from, a high of 93%. Oh, by the way, that 85%, that would have been probably 97 or 98% there, except some of the fish escaped during and right after a typhoon came by on this particular trial. But you can see the thing of note there, the FCR is 1.25 with the 36% and 32% will 1.41. But that doesn't mean, and I'll show you the next slide here, that doesn't mean the 36 in this grow out trial was the most profitable. You see here, the return on investment down on the bottom line there, return on investment using the 32% diet due to cost and whatnot was a little bit better than the ROI on the 36. Now, this is for grow out. For fingerlings, it probably would have been the reverse. Okay. Okay, so with that said, I'll wrap up my thing here. I think I'm about on time. So thank you and Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Jesse. Very good stuff on IPRS. And our third speaker is Ken Semmens, and he is from Kentucky State University. Ken, we look forward to hearing your thoughts on the subject of domestic aquaculture and feed, especially soy optimized feed.
Okay, let me try to share my screen here. Jesse, have you stopped sharing your screen?
Don't know.
Yes, I guess you have. Okay.
Yeah, let's see here. Do you want to?
Okay.
No. All right, so you should have to go now. Sorry.
Okay. Sure. All right. And,
Great. If you put it in presentation mode, I think we will be ready to go.
okay. From beginning. Are you there?
Yes, we are.
Okay. I'm afraid I've focused a little differently. I'm thinking in a much smaller scale on a kind of my backyard here. And when I'm looking at a farm pond, I'm asking you this same question. Let's see, try to move this around here. This is a winter view of a 1.6 acre watershed pond of NRCS design that is really never drained. This occurs on our research farm, and it represents ponds common throughout our region. And when you look at this, what comes to mind? Most likely livestock watering or a water source for farm use of some sort, perhaps recreational fishing, perhaps soil conservation. My focus is the small farm and aquaculture. And this is really a place to convert feed into fish for food or recreation. Now, I don't normally think about soy inclusion rates because that's just not information that comes from my feed supplier. So please bear with me if I don't really focus on that. I'll come back to it at the very end. The tool I'm choosing to use for the small farm is a floating raceway for many of the reasons that Jesse just outlined. It's a rather simple system where the fish are confined in a channel with screens on either end. This particular figure is intended to sort of convey what an individual unit might feature, with a device to push water through it. And then essentially you have an aquatic feedlot here. And all of our work is supported by USDA. We're trying to make use of existing water sources because the small farm really doesn't have the funds or the concept of investing in a large scale aquaculture entity. That's not our focus. We're trying to make things more workable by using existing water sources, and we're pushing rather than lifting water. And so is Jesse with the raceways that he's referring to. Those are done on a much larger scale with facilities that are made specifically for commercial aquaculture. But they do use a grid airlift and provide a continuous aerated flow. And that's really a relatively new development in the floating raceways or in-pond raceways. And it's really very effective. The fish are fed a pelleted feed at a high density. That is, the fish are kept at a high density, and the types of fish grown must accept the feed and be able to tolerate a high density. But by having them confined in this way, they're readily accessible, they're protected from predators, and for our small farm, it's basically going in the morning, loading the demand feeders and making sure everything's operating like it should. So the labor profile may fit the small farm depending on how it's oriented, The pond processes the waste. There is potential to recover solid waste, and that certainly would be wise, but we're just not there yet. There are fish outside the raceway. In our system, we have paddlefish. I know Jesse's probably smiling because paddlefish and I go back a long ways. But paddlefish are filter feeders that can actually produce a black caviar, and they are able to grow there in the pond. We can catch them with gill nets. But we also have our brood catfish, and we collect catfish spawns. There are bass and bluegill, and so there's still some recreational fishing. The concept of having a floating raceway also fits with the idea that if you choose to liquidate your investment, you can get something back on it. Kind of like trying to sell a used recirculating aquaculture system. You don't get top dollar for that, but you can get something. And our system that we're using here is basically 3 large raceways. I consider them small, medium, and large, where large would be for grow out, medium would be for stocker size fish, and small could be for fingerlings. And we're at a point where we have 4 raceways now, the 3 large ones, and then raceway 4 is one of our own design at a more modest scale. And this is actually the large raceways are a commercial product from a company called superiorraceways.com. They hold about 11,000 gallons. And that is, if they were simply to hold water in that way, it would hold 11,000. It's a kit that we assemble. There are other items required for the entire system. And so that $5,000 covers just the raceway, and whether you have docks, power source, backup generator, it all adds up. And for a small farmer, this is a significant investment. We think that we can do better. But central to the success of floating raceway or in-pond raceways is this grid airlift. We're using a unit like this, where these hoses across the bottom are essentially diffusers, and it creates a whole grid of rising bubbles that also push the water horizontally. This is what it looks like when it's operating. So the water would be flowing down toward the bottom of the frame of the slide. Now, how much can we get? I'll get to that in a minute. But we're also looking at other devices to move water. Just take a propeller aerator and put it so it pushes the water sideways. Of course, there's not the aeration there. We evaluated a 3/4 horsepower Casco unit. But the slow rotational paddle wheel is actually the most energy efficient for moving water. This is a device that was created by a UK ag engineering senior design project, and we think serious improvements can be made in this, but it draws a 1/15 horsepower motor. Now, the flow rates that we're getting in these systems, the grid airlift is around 4,200 gallons per minute. The aerator motor propeller AMP is what I call that. The amps are comparable volume. This is with 100% open, that is no screens. A slow rotational paddle wheel, even though it's a 1/15 horsepower motor, delivered 1,700 gallons per minute. And so if you compare energy efficiency, the slow rotational paddle wheel, well, this isn't energy efficiency. This is just a comparison of the flow rate among the 3. And it's showing the grid airlift had an excellent aeration, excellent flow, but it required more energy. And this is something we're working on because we ultimately want to have a solar system that works off grid. Looking at mesh size, obviously smaller mesh will have greater resistance. And this flow shows that with percent open and decreasing mesh size from a 1/2 down to 1/2 inch, we get a 4,200 down to 2,400. That's a significant reduction in flow, and that's not accounting for any kind of other stuff that might grow on the screen during your normal operation. This is clean screens measuring these flows. So we key in on flow, and that's what most folks in raceways, especially if you've run trout, you'll key in on flow that way. Regarding solar feasibility, we're not there yet, but this is one thing we'd like to be able to solve. We have just a single season growing fish in our grow out system. And I know, Jesse, this is much smaller than what you guys do at Auburn, but we're proud of it. We harvested from that 1.6 acre pond about 13,000 pounds of catfish. And Jesse pointed to the survival rates. And yes, this 83 is not good because the raceway did not deliver sufficient flow to keep everybody happy, and we lost some fish. So your grid airlift, Jesse, it's great stuff, okay? It worked very well. But catfish is not what really we're focusing on, because we can get more than twice the price for a largemouth bass. And this is a complicated fish to grow. It requires a high protein diet. It requires, in the first year of life, the red print here shows 3 phases: a nursery phase, a feed training phase, and a stocker phase. The grow out, it takes 2 seasons to get there. And these are the milestones that we must meet. The fry start, believe it or not, 0.003 grams each and have about a 20% growth per day. And they're feeding on natural food during the first 30 days of life. Feed training may take about 3 weeks, where they grow from 1 to 4 grams. And then phase 2, you got to get that growth in by the end of the year before it turns cold. So you get a fish that's at least 100 grams, 120, 130 is better. And that's showing how the growth rate is declining from 21 to 7 to 4. And then in final grow out, you're getting about 1% per day. Our design improvements that we'd like to include are to have flotation built into the raceway, suspending it from a floating frame, a uniform cross section with a hard flat bottom, keyway for removable screens, and have the entire end wall an open screen to get as uniform flow as possible. We'd like to assemble with common materials at the point of use and have something that's somewhat scalable. And this is our first pilot scale, and we're using it in 2 different ways. In phase 1 as a floating nursery, where we're confining the fry, yes, the fry, which are about the size of a filament from fiberglass, and growing them to a small size that can be feed trained, and then possibly using the floating raceway in those phases as well. Picture of the fry, and at the end of the first phase, these fish actually are probably about 1.5 grams, so they're a little bit bigger. And we found that we could raft our raceways together. And so in this case, we have a combination really of 3, what would be equivalent to 3 ponds worth of production in one, but the fish are not loose in the pond. That pond is managed for zooplankton, and the fry are stocked in there. We're able to harvest them very easily, much easier than harvesting a pond. The numbers need to improve, but in this case, we were stocking about 6,000 fish per raceway. And
Ken is frozen. Well, until he comes back, Luke and Jesse, I do have a couple questions. He might have to reboot. What are the top 3 things that a production system needs to consider in order to determine their optimal soy inclusion rate?
Well,
Go ahead, Luke.
yeah, I guess every system's different. In RAS, you're working a lot to get rid of small particles, especially with higher soy inclusion rates. Typically, you're seeing more fines. So I think systems and the species are big factors. Like I said, I think different species, you can push the inclusion rates, but your marine species and your salmonids, you're kind of limited on what you can include. But if you're a flow through system and you're not regulated with effluent, then likely you can push your inclusion rates of soy if that's, kind of feasible, but it all depends on species and systems, I think.
Yeah, you really are limited by what's your cleanup capacity of whatever system is you're in. So if you have no cleanup system, you're very limited as to what you can do and what you can produce. But as we've added aeration and filtration or biofiltration and all of these things, we now can produce a lot of fish per unit volume on a very small parcel of land that is not a pond at all. I mean, typical of wrasse. So the pond systems that we're working on with the raceways, a lot of them, I'm going to say most of them, the farmers already have a capital investment made in those ponds. So this is a way for them to advance that and utilize that investment for more years, because they're now able to produce 200 to 300% more annual yield using this IPRS apparatus, because it allows us to clean up the system a little bit better.
Yeah, good thoughts. Ken, I see you're back. We're at the Q&A session, but I know you have probably just some summary points to hit home on. I love seeing the different types of production systems. We have a huge country with a lot of different things going on by region. So I love the diversity we've seen. And you're on mute. Oh, Ken, you're still on mute.
Well,
There you go.
Okay, where did I drop out?
Towards the end of just, if in the interest of time, just your summary, if you have any final thoughts
Right.
from this, we'll share presentations if people are interested.
Yeah. Well, we're going with bass because we can make more. That is, they sell at a better price. And frankly, if we grow a more valuable fish, we don't have to grow as many pounds of it, we think. And the pond will be able to handle it. But we'd like to improve the raceway and actually make the concept of growing fish more of a common concept that could be done, whether it's for supplementary income to a small farmer, possibly to a community that might want to create fishing. Anyway, it's just a much smaller scale than the Soy Aquaculture Alliance normally thinks, okay? But I find it difficult to get aquaculture started on a small farm in this country, and the market is going to be an important dimension there as well. So I'll end it with that.
Yeah, good thoughts. We appreciate that very much. Couple questions. The Q&A has been active, and thanks, Luke, for addressing the ones directed to yourself and your company. I'm curious, just for the Soy Aquaculture Alliance's benefit, what are the biggest gaps, either in terms of education or research? I know, Ken, you mentioned, hey, my feed person doesn't provide any information on soy in the diet, therefore I'm not very educated. So when it comes to education and or research for domestic production systems to maximize their inclusion of soy, what does the Soy Aquaculture Alliance and our industry need to focus on?
Well, this is Ken Semmens. I think what you've been doing is wonderful. I'm not an industrial nutritionist, and no small producer will be. His choice is, do I buy from company A or company B, and what product line do they have? Now, if those industrial nutritionists are able to make use of the soy protein concentrate, and they have a product that performs well, and then we're aware of that, and quite frankly, feeding trials to know what actually works for the small guy, well, for any guy, feeding trials are not are not something that are done to convey information to the farmer. And maybe that's not the best place, because then you have feed company A competing with feed company B, and I don't know how to solve that. My choice really is, do I buy a feed from a company that has the product form? Now, I'm also looking for a slow sink diet, and I'm looking for I'm buying right now a trout diet because I don't have a bass diet formulated for optimum growth of largemouth bass. But the volume and the choices that someone has is really from one feed company to another, and there aren't that many out there that make products for small producers.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And maybe Luke, I mean, you guys obviously have to get your product into the value chain. So with that, within the auspice of that question, how do you educate feed companies to ensure end users have the right information or options on soy and its benefits?
Well, yeah, I think a lot of the trials that we've been running, and just you know, our customers are obviously the feed mills, and there's always, you know, some issues with formulators when you talk about soy, right? So some formulators are like, yeah, well, that's great, but I can't put it in at too high of an inclusion, or you know, I'm not willing to sacrifice performance of fish meal, or fish meal's price isn't too terrible right now. So I think it's just a lot of the stuff that you guys are doing, and you know, needing more. You know, a lot of the trials that I run are great and all, but they might not necessarily translate to huge operations. So we just got to do better job as an industry, I think, just letting everyone know what we're doing, and the fact that, you know, Prairie Aquatech has our own R&D facility, and we're testing not only our ingredients but other ingredients, because we want to, you know, help grow this industry. I think that's our main focus. And domestically, US aquaculture isn't near what it could be. So I think especially with RAS and how that's going to go will really influence how we can get more soy included in the market.
Great. Jesse, any concluding thoughts on that?
Let me make a point here that I think is, again, we all know this, but we need to kind of keep restating it. You don't make money growing fish. You make money selling fish. And the whole idea here is to sell it for more than you got in it. Well, again, these are obvious things, but developing a market, an increased market demand for seafoods, plural. And again, I would love to see more produced here domestically, but you have to have folks willing to invest and do that. And part of it is, well, okay, I can see there's a demand enough out there to where I can produce another, you know, a few million or several million pounds to go in to meet that need in the market. Well, so growing that demand by whatever means we can is really, really critical. And Luke pointed out perfectly. I mean, you know, you can do all these things, but we're not doing it in a philanthropic kind of a way, trying to make money doing this. If you're doing it at smaller scale, you know, you need to be able to sell those units for more money than if you're doing it at a larger scale, and you can, you know, work on a smaller margin. But in the end, it's about adding value to feed grains. And so soy is, of course, what we're talking about here today. It's the main protein source for most of the fish grown in the world. And the more market share of that U.S. farmers can get, that's what I'm about. And here again, we the folks in the production area, we're typically not in the market arena, but at the same time, we need to be finding ways to focus on increasing demand here domestically for all kinds of seafood.
That's a great point. And you know, looking ahead in international markets, personally, what we're trying to focus on, because there are so many species within aquaculture. And how do you recommend that the Soy Aquaculture Alliance prioritize species? Specifically, what are the top 3 species opportunities over the next 5 years, considering growth trends? And what geographies are friendliest or most likely to grow aquaculture operations in the United States? What's your crystal ball say? Jesse, I'll start with you.
Well, my little crystal ball is so tiny I can barely see it, but I'll try to tell you what it said. You know, here in the South, I expect to see more, you know, domestic production of warm water species. It might be tilapia, it could be shrimps, it can be catfish, can be hybrid striped bass, those that are either warm water or slightly cooler than warm water. But the opportunities in terms of land, water, other natural resources and utilities are very, very strong. Feedstuffs are, generally speaking, available for whatever you want, whether you're growing broilers or turkeys or swine. I mean, we have a lot of that down here. It's not like, you know, Illinois and Indiana. No, it's not, but we still have enough. But at the same time, you can move these feedstuffs by rail or by truck from those production centers pretty efficiently and not have to be waiting on a train group of cars to arrive your feed mill. So there will be those kinds of species that I think the opportunities for doing aquaculture in the United States are stronger than they've ever been. And it's just going to, some of it has to do with marketing, but some of it has to do with, you know, getting the right investors lined up with the right technologies and the right group of technologies to make the business ROI better.
Yeah, great thought. Luke, what do you think?
I'll say salmon and shrimp and trout, just because of their, you know, high value. The fact that, I'll say it again, that you got Atlantic Sapphire, Nordic Aqua Farms, you know, the guys in Maine. There's tons of push to close this import. The fact that we have to import so much seafood, and the U.S. eats a ton of salmon, that's the reason why we have these big companies developing or building facilities to close that gap. So, and shrimp is a big industry, not very big in the U.S., but you can shrimp, you know, what you guys, the other Jesse and Ken talked about is survival. And in the shrimp industry, that's 100% what it is. They don't necessarily worry about the best growth, but if you got all your shrimp at the end of the day.
Last question.
So
Mm-hmm.
that's about all I had to say. But yeah, and the trout industry is definitely something that's growing, but you know, there's not as big of an interest, I don't think, in shrimp as shrimp and salmon. So
No, definitely noted. And Ken, final thoughts on that? How do we assess greatest opportunity, region, and species?
Well, I think you're going to be rather surprised. I would like to say in my own backyard that we're going to do all kinds of things, but I think the pattern is pretty well set. And I think that there are serious reasons that aquaculture has not grown as expected. And I can list what I think the critical components are. I have a slide here if you want, but the fish I'm going to select is tuna. I think the opportunity for growth, I mean, let's see what happens with these land-based recirculating systems on huge scale. I don't think that it's a foregone conclusion that it's going to be as bright and shining as what perhaps we perceive at this point. We all hope it will be, but I think that the opportunity for the long term with a fish like tuna is really phenomenal.
Yeah.
I hear you. And we're doing some work and work has been done in the United States on tuna. So I agree, high value fish. With that, there's more questions, but we are out of time. And in the interest of everyone's interest of wanting to see more domestic aquaculture production due to the demand and consumption patterns in the United States, we are with you. U.S. soy farmers are ready to contribute to those diets, but also in the interim, U.S. Soybean Export Council will be working diligently to ensure seafood we do import is fed U.S. soy as well. So that's why we have a strong partnership. Thank you, everybody. This will be posted on the Soy Aquaculture Alliance website. If you have questions, there's the email address. And I want to turn it over to Kenlyn Johannes, to give some closing words as the executive director.
Thank you very much, Courtney. I'm Kenlyn Johannes, Executive Director of the Soy Aquaculture Alliance, and I want to thank you all for attending this virtual forum. I want to give a big thank you to our panelists, Jesse, Luke, Ken. What a great job! A lot of activity in our chat room. That's great, and I especially want to thank Courtney, our moderator. Well done again, Courtney. We appreciate all of you taking the time to share your insights with us today, and for challenging us to critically think about what's next for soy and aquaculture. I want to thank our board of directors too, and the members of SAA for helping sponsor this event. And Blank Page, of course, thank you for handling all the logistics again. It went well. The challenges are always there, but thank you. Our board members drive our research investments and decisions. So we're here to answer questions that you pose to drive an increased U.S. soybeans. We value the partnerships with our leading companies, researchers, and organizations across aquaculture, farm and feed areas. We hope to be a catalyst for bringing everyone to the table and to move the industry forward. Domestically provided quality feedstocks, as we've seen from our partners, especially at Prairie Aquatech. Growing markets always good for our soybean markets and our soybean farmers. We hope we spark some conversation and new ideas. We welcome your input. If you have any questions, you see my email address there. Well, it's not on that one, but it's johannes@soyaquaculture.org. And if you have any suggestions for future virtual workshops, please let us know. You can send questions also to info@Soy Aquaculture. This workshop was recorded, be available on our website. Thank you again for participating, your thoughtful questions that you provided to us, and look for our next workshop in the future. Have a wonderful day, and thank you all.
Thank you all, and have a great rest of the year and happy holidays. Eat more soy and eat some soy-fed fish for us. Thank you.
Okay.